Two-Face here, back with another reaction video. This time I'm reacting to Battle of Talikota 1565 AD, Watershed Moment in the History of India by History March. Now, if you haven't seen my reaction to the first two episodes in this four-episode series by History March, I suggest you check them out before checking this one out. And the usual disclaimer when I react to anything historical, if I don't show so much what is considered a proper reaction, it is probably obvious I don't know much about the subject at hand, and if I do know anything, I'll most likely pause the video to give my input or ask any curious questions, which hopefully will be answered in the comments below. With that being said, the link to the original video will be in the description down below. Please go and subscribe to History March. And there's not much more I can say, so full screen that, get that up there, captions are on, and it's done it again. Right, there we go. Oh, and check out Hoc Est Bellum as well.
From the 8th century onwards, the Indian subcontinent was subject to relentless Islamic invasions. Eventually, Muslim leaders oversaw the forming of various empires and sultanates, establishing a presence that lasted for centuries.
The Islamic empires of the Delhi Sultanate and the Mughals ruled much northern India for almost 6 centuries.
Around the mid-1500s, in the Deccan region of South India, the presence of those faithful to the word of the Prophet was manifested in the form of 5 sultanates that, despite sharing the same faith, were constantly at each other's throats. But while the Islamic states were expanding their influence and territories, local Hindus were not being idle. Just to the south of the Deccan Sultanate stood a powerful Hindu state, the Vijayanagara Empire.
Vijayanagara.
This video is brought to you by March of Empires, a free-to-download medieval MMO war strategy that caters to fans of history and wargaming with its rich historic...
Feel free to check that out if you're interested.
The Vijayanagara Empire rose to prominence as a culmination of attempts by the southern Hindu powers to ward off Islamic invasions. At its peak, it had subjugated almost all of South India's ruling families, thus becoming a notable power. In 1542 AD, the latest Vijayanagara emperor died at a young age, leaving only his nephew Sadashiva Raya, who was underage at the time, as the heir to the throne. A commander and son-in-law of the previous emperor, Rama Raya, saw an opportunity to assert himself and seize the throne. He was a valiant commander, a skillful and fearsome warrior, who had led several successful campaigns in the past, and was also an able administrator and diplomat. Acting as regent, he put the legitimate heir under virtual house arrest, quickly taking control of the state, and replaced officers in important positions with people personally loyal to him. Now a de facto ruler of the Vijayanagara Empire, Ramaraya's policy was that of pitting one sultan against the other, aiming to expand the borders of his empire and keeping the realm secure by capitalizing on the enmity between the Deccan sultans. This policy of divide and rule was made easier by the quarreling Deccan sultans, who repeatedly asked Ramaraya to act as mediator. In the mid-1540s, when the rulers of Ahmadnagar and Golconda sought help against the Sultan of Bijapur, Ramaraya initiated his policy of intervention by entering the conflict and securing a strategic area to the north of his realm. A couple of years later, in 1549, the ruler of Bijapur and Bidar declared war on Nizam Shah of Ahmadnagar. As a result, Ramaraya fought on behalf of the Ahmadnagar ruler and secured the fort of Kalyana. Then in 1557, he allied himself with Ali Adil Shah of Bijapur and the ruler of Bidar during the Bijapur invasion of Ahmadnagar. The combined armies of the three kingdoms were able to defeat the alliance between Ahmadnagar and Golconda. Year in, year out, as conflicts between the Deccan Sultanates continued for almost 20 years, Ramaraya skillfully kept switching sides to further his interests. Then, in 1558,
Suppose that's one way to divide and conquer.
yet another conflict sparked between the Deccan Sultanates. The ruler of Bijapur was on the brink of war with the Sultan of Ahmadnagar. Ali Adil Shah of Bijapur sought the assistance of the ruler of Golconda and of Ramaraya. In a continuation of this vicious cycle of interchangeable and opportunistic coalitions, which was typical of the period, the three powers entered into an alliance. In 1559, the large allied host traveled north to Ahmadnagar and besieged the fortress capital. The Ahmadnagar forces chose to abandon the capital and engage in guerrilla warfare, given the overwhelming odds against them. Reportedly, Ramaraya and his army responded by committing terrible atrocities and inflicting horrific violence upon the locals, destroying mosques and ravaging the countryside. This display of cruelty shocked the ruler of Golconda, who backed out of the alliance. The ruler of Bijapur was equally alarmed by the conduct of his ally, but remained loyal due to political concerns. By 1561, Hussein Nizam Shah of Ahmadnagar sued for peace. Ramaraya accepted on the condition that Hussein agree to three humiliating terms. First, give disputed lands to Bijapur. Second, execute his best general. And third, Hussein would be forced to eat out of Ramaraya's hands, a humiliating act deemed outrageous at the time.
Wow.
Having little choice, the ruler of Bijapur complied, but swore vengeance. Needless to say, Ramaraya had by now become a problematic ally for the Sultanates, but what eventually tipped the political scale against him was what he did next. While retreating through Bijapur, his army plundered and ravaged the lands of his own ally, even going as far as annexing some of his territory. Feeling utterly betrayed, Ali Adil Shah terminated his alliance with Ramaraya. The leaders of the Deccan Sultanates realized that the real threat was the aggressive and powerful Vijayanagara Empire. And so, the Sultans of Bijapur, Ahmadnagar and Golconda entered a pact. Intermarriage between Sultanate families helped resolve any differences between the Muslim rulers, cementing their alliance. Resentful, they agreed to make war against Vijayanagara, and as soon as the marriage festivities were over, an emissary was sent to Ramaraya's court with a simple message: give up the key forts of Mudgal and Raichur. Ramaraya made no attempt to hide his contempt for this ultimatum, and sent the emissary back without even considering a formal reply. The stage was set. In early 1565, the combined forces of Ahmadnagar, Bijapur and Golconda began marching towards Vijayanagara. Meanwhile, an overconfident Ramaraya continued to remain unperturbed, and even though he didn't perceive this as a threat of any consequence, he nonetheless began to make his own preparations. A contingent of about 20,000 horsemen was sent as an advance force under the leadership of one of his brothers. He followed up with another force of sizable strength, intending to prevent the Islamic army from crossing the Krishna River, which demarcated the northern borders of his empire. The huge but cumbersome Vijayanagara army slowly marched to meet the enemy. On the 28th of December 1564, Allied Sultanate armies reached the river Krishna and were soon followed by the huge army of Rama Raya. The fords were few and well guarded by Hindu vanguards, and given the numerical advantage of the Vijayanagara army, a contested crossing would have been far too risky for the coalition forces. It was the Sultan of Ahmadnagar who eventually came up with a cunning stratagem. He ordered the Sultanate armies to march eastwards to an undefended ferry further down the river. Rama Raya started following him after withdrawing many of his forces from the river fords. For 2 days, both armies marched eastwards until, on the 2nd of January 1565, behind the screen of dust that was made by the moving army, a select body of hardy and swift cavalry under Nizam Shah made a forced march back to the original fording point. The few remaining Vijayanagara troops that were guarding the ford were caught completely off guard and were annihilated by the lightning-fast Muslim contingent. With a bridgehead secured, the rest of the Sultanate armies lost no time and immediately marched back and crossed the river. In a stroke of genius, Nizam Shah stole the crossing, avoiding potentially massive casualties. Despite being outwitted, the old Vijayanagara regent, who was then in his 80s, was not disheartened by this setback. He decided to personally lead the Hindu armies and ordered some of his units to randomly attack the Muslim force. But the conduct of his soldiers was undisciplined and without a strategy. After some minor skirmishing, the two armies marched southwards until they reached a plain near the city of Talikota. At the crack of dawn, on January 26, 1565, the two enormous armies arrayed for battle. Estimations about the size of the Muslim force that marched against Rama Raya's empire vary wildly. In total, the army numbered around 80,000 infantry and 30,000 cavalry, accompanied by several dozen modern artillery cannons that were the trump card of the Allied army. The army of the Deccan Sultanates deployed in a linear formation, with infantry and cavalry intermixed between the different rulers of the coalition. The cannons were placed behind the main line. Rama Raya's Hindu army was even larger, numbering an estimated 140,000 infantry, 10,000 cavalry, and over 100 war elephants. The force also included a considerable amount of cannons, but their artillery pieces were heavy, unwieldy, and obsolete. The Vijayanagara also deployed in a linear, bulky formation, designed to use the advantage of their huge numerical superiority. Rama Raya's army would rely on brute force to win the day. Around noon, the battle began with heavy artillery fire. The barrage lasted for almost 2 hours, but did little damage to both armies. Then, the right wing of the Hindu army charged frantically against the enemy left wing. Hindu soldiers plowed through the Muslim divisions, their assault so vigorous that it looked like a Hindu victory was imminent. Nizam Shah sent a few of his forces to shore up the ranks of his hard-pressed left, which was by now in retreat. What followed was a bloody melee of men and metal. Soon afterward, the Hindu left wing fell upon the opposing Muslim right. Here, too, it initially appeared to be a Hindu onslaught. As the bloody and obstinate combat was raging on, swift Muslim horse archers wheeled to their right and began peppering the Hindu formations with murderous arrows. Now, the odds turned, as Rama Raya's forces were being pushed back. A few contemporary reports also claim that two Islamic commanders that served in the Hindu army on the left wing now switched sides and refused to fight and kill fellow Muslims.
Oh, wow.
Seeing this, the Hindu leader ordered his treasurer to place heaps of money all around him so that he might confer rewards on anyone distinguishing himself in battle. We are not cowards to be intimidated of this insignificant war. Go on, fight! He cried out. Reinvigorated by this display of bravery, the Hindu center now charged against Nizam Shah's men. A tumultuous crowd of thousands of men was now attacking the heart of the Islamic army. It was the critical point of the battle. Just before the Hindu soldiers reached the Mohammedan line, the front rank of artillery pieces fired a devastating shot at close quarters. In a moment of pure genius, the artillery officers had stuffed their guns not with the usual shot, but with bags full of slug-like copper coins. In one grape shot, 5,000 of the Vijayanagarans lay dead or writhing in pain. This tactic threw the Hindu center into confusion, upon which 5,000 Muslim cavalry charged through the intervals and cut their way into the midst of the disorganized mass, trying to reach the spot where Rama Raya had taken post. Dismounted from his horse, Rama Raya was instead carried on a sedan chair, ultimately failing to escape the fast-moving Muslim cavalry. The litter bearers let fall their precious burden in terror at the enemy's approach. Before he had time to recover himself and mount a horse, the old commander was seized and promptly beheaded. This event threw the Hindus into a general panic. What followed next was a massive and disorganized retreat. Seizing the moment, Nizam Shah's cavalry charged the retreating Hindus. The warriors of Islam slaughtered everyone in sight, along an area spanning about 20 miles, now littered with dead bodies. The stragglers fled to their capital from the victorious Muslim army, but the confusion was so great that little attempt was made to defend the walls and the approaches. Eventually, almost all of the Hindu army was annihilated. The victorious sultans marched to the capital of the empire virtually unopposed. Those who had the means escaped, but others were not so lucky. With axes, crowbars, fire and sword, the victorious armies of the Deccan sultanates went about the task of bringing to rubble the city of Vijayanagara. In just a few days, one of the most magnificent cities in the world was reduced to a smoldering ruin. It never recovered from the destruction. The Battle of Talikota was a decisive moment for the history of the Indian subcontinent. It was the death knell for large Hindu kingdoms in India, spelling the end of the Vijayanagara Empire, which survived only as an insignificant peripheral kingdom until 1646.
After the death of Alaya Rama Raya, the Battle of Talikota, one of his brothers started the Aravidu dynasty. Dynasty ended in 1646. Keeps doing that.
Special thanks to our friend Hawk S. Bellum for collaborating with us on this video. He also makes animated battles, so make sure to check out his channel, like this one possible. Consider joining them to support our work.
Rama Raya was eventually beheaded by Sultan Nizam Hussain himself, or on his behest. His death created confusion and havoc. His brother Tirumala deserted the battlefield with the entire army and tried to temporarily regroup in Vijayanagara before moving on to the outskirts of their empire. His other brother was blinded and was probably a battle casualty.
You can also support us by subscribing to our channel and clicking
the Sultanate armies went on to plunder the Vijayanagara unopposed. The degree of destruction is debated by historians.
Bell button to get notified when our new videos are released. And as always, thank you for watching.
The battle caused a political rupture of the state of the Vijayanagara and permanently reconfigured Deccan politics. Patronage and monuments and temples ceased. The Vaishnava cult perished and the Vijayanagara was never rebuilt. Wow. And that'll do it. This is another interesting video in this series about the history of India by History March. And I'm going by their playlist. There's one more episode to go, so if you like this reaction, please like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in the next